Mr. Kip Sorensen. Excuse me. Hold on. Let me back up.
Whatever.
Mr.
I already know.
Black Belt Kip Sorensen. Sorry, Master. Sorry, Professor.
Yeah,
I need to make
whatever.
sure that I address this correctly. Look, man, I'm teasing, but I'm proud, dude. I'm really glad for you. I know we spent all of last week training, and I hurt your knee, and I felt really bad about that.
I was nervous.
And
I was nervous on Saturday, but it was fine. It was totally fine. I was probably more nervous than I should have been.
but when I think I saw on your Instagram stories that you had been promoted and awarded your black belt, and I would just felt like a deep sense of satisfaction and like just genuine excitement for you, because I know how much this journey has meant to you, man. I'm just really excited for you.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. And it's, I was at one point, probably this week, I wanted to put my thoughts around it because it was kind of interesting. I tested with 8 other people,
Mm-hmm.
and this is what's crazy. At the school on Saturday, we have 24 black belts. That's not all of them. And it's just nuts that we have that many black belts in a school, right?
How many
Training.
students do you guys
It
think you
blows my
have,
mind.
like, total?
Oh, probably 300 plus.
Okay, so you've got a
Yeah.
lot of students,
Yeah.
but you're
Big
talking about
school.
almost 10% of them being black belts, which is pretty
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just nuts. But nonetheless, I was thinking, we have all these spectators, and as each person gets up and they're having that belt tied around the waist, there's like tears being shed, right? Even
Of
from the
course.
guys, just
Of
such an
course.
emotional thing. And I wonder, like, do the spectators comprehend some of these people? Some of them do, because they're spouses and they've seen their spouse like drudge through this. But those that aren't are
Right.
kind of like, oh man, they're kind of emotional. It's like, I don't, I think the common individual has no idea. And it's not like, oh, it's not time. That's not actually, that's like the least part of it. It's like, hey, if I added up all the hours, that's a lot of time. That in
Mhm.
itself is kind of like, hey, that's an accomplishment. But it's the mental, wars and battles on the mat over and over with individuals that really drives that emotion of like what it means to have that belt tied around your neck. Well, actually, I got it tied around my neck
You
too,
are.
because I got choked
I
out
was.
by everybody afterwards.
I was
But
gonna say that isn't probably too far off from reality.
no,
So.
no, no. But what I meant was, like, it's an emotional because of the war, the mental war and physical wars on the
Mhm.
mats that had to occur so many times, the internal battle of humility and pride and fighting fear and anger and just all those things. I mean, that's really the accomplishment. And so it's a little surreal for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for you, man. I was thinking about it. I was nervous about it, and then I shot you a message. I'm like, so how did it go? Because I wanted to
Yeah.
hear. And man, it's just so cool. It's just
Yeah.
really
Thank you.
cool. You said something interesting about uh, the lessons of humility and the mental war and the battle that you have to go through. I remember last week I was training with somebody, I can't remember right offhand, uh, and we were doing nogi, which I don't train a lot of nogi. I mean, maybe 5% of my training is nogi, maybe the
Yeah.
rest is gi. And this guy just absolutely demolished me, like embarrassed me. And it was open mat, and he wasn't a jerk or anything. Like, he was a good training
Just,
partner. He's just doing his
yeah.
work, right? He was trying to get
Yeah.
better. I was trying to get better. So there wasn't any sort of ill will or anything like that. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. But it was the evening session. So we got done at what, 9:30, 10 o'clock with that evening session. And I was at the chow hall afterwards because we had some snacks and stuff. And I was just so demoralized. I was
Yeah.
like, but Echo said something very interesting. Were you there when Echo said, and I'm paraphrasing here, he said, if you get done with jujitsu and you're driving home and you had a bad training session, if you're thinking to yourself, I never want to go back, that's probably a pretty good indicator that maybe you don't really love it as much as you should.
Mm.
And then he said, but alternatively, if you are driving home after that bad training session and you've had way more than I probably have at this point, right? And you think, and you're not deflated, you think to yourself, I want to go back to like get better so I can do better, so I can perform better next time.
Yeah.
That's an indicator that maybe this is something for you. And I felt the same way in that. I was like, I was upset at my performance, but I wasn't demoralized. I was like, oh, I need to get better so that and I just wanted to go back and train that night. And I think
Yeah.
that's the mindset that separates winners and losers, not just in jujitsu, but in life. You know, we all get kicked in the balls from time to time, literally and figuratively. And I think we have to ask ourselves, is getting that kick in the pants, is it demoralizing to the point where you don't want to drive forward anymore? Or is the mentality more, I never want that to happen again, so here's what I'm going to do to ensure that's the case? And I think the
Yeah,
latter is the winner's mindset versus the victim mindset.
for sure. For sure. And you mentioned something that I thought was interesting. Will was there filming for the black belt test. Super
Mm-hmm.
excited actually
Oh,
with
that's right.
what,
Yeah, that's right.
with what he puts together. But Will afterwards, they're like, you know, it was really interesting. He's like, because we had open mat right after the belt test. And he's like, it was really interesting because I'm watching these guys film and I'm just like, where I'm filming these guys and they're just after each other. Yeah. And if I
Mm-hmm.
was just watching, I'm thinking there's anger, there's animosity, like they're trying to hurt each other, right? Because these guys
Yeah,
are so just
sure.
getting after it. And then after they're done, they're like, oh man, that was great. And they're all kind to each other. And he's like, it's so interesting, you know?
Right.
But that's, you know, that's the mindset, right? It's like battle. And then after the battle's over, it's like, good job. You know, that was
Totally.
great. Yeah. And move
Did you
on.
see
So,
that post that I had made a couple of days ago? Because I had the opportunity to roll with Ricardo Laborio.
yeah,
And
I watched it. Yeah.
holy cow. I mean, I'm sure you and other people are watching it with like a critical eye of like, oh, he could have done this and he could have done that. Not like judging me. I don't take it that way, but just
Yeah,
like working through it themselves.
for
And
sure.
I've watched it probably 2 dozen times at this point. Like, oh, I missed that, or I did this, or oh, he grabbed my leg there, and that's why I couldn't roll, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I wrote in here 10 or 11 lessons that I learned, and one of them, this is number 6. If you guys want to see this list, go to Instagram, and my handle's at Ryan Mickler. But number 6 is, here's one of the lessons: find good, and this ties into what you were saying with Will. Find good training partners in jujitsu and in life. They'll apply the proper amount of pressure to test you, but afford you some grace along the path.
Yeah. And
And
you
I,
could see that in your train with him.
oh,
It was like,
totally.
okay, I'm going to let Ryan play here, see what he
Let him
does.
work a little bit.
Yeah. Let him
Right.
work a little bit and then I'll progress, right? Based upon
Right.
his reaction. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this goes to what Will was saying with you for your testing is, as a spectator, it would be hard to see these lessons in it because you see violence or aggression or dominance or anger or whatever you interpret it to be, but it's really not. It's really a healthy level of cooperation. You
Yeah.
know, we cooperate, we work together. Even if we're going through techniques, it's like, okay, I'm going to let you twist on my ankle, or I'm going to let you try to wrap my neck up, and I'm actually going to let you do it. I'm going to put a little resistance so you feel what the resistance is like, but I'm going to let you apply this pressure, because, well, there's a level of trust here, right?
Yeah.
I trust you that you won't be unnecessarily aggressive,
Yeah.
and you have to trust me that I'm going to allow you to do it, but tap when I need to and stuff. So that
Yeah.
mutual level of trust is such a big component of this. And again, guys, we talk about jujitsu all the time, but fill it in with whatever. I don't fill it in with family or accountability partner or work or whatever lens you're viewing it through. You guys know what we're saying. It jujitsu isn't about jujitsu. It's about everything. It's about the 99.9% of what is in jujitsu in life.
Yeah. And it was fun to see other order band guys, a few guys from the Iron Council there. You know, I think we heard from a couple guys saying, hey, I started this path because
Yeah,
of listening to
that
the
was cool.
podcast, you know? So
Yeah,
I'm
that
like,
was
yeah,
cool.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a
Well,
good
good, man.
week. It
Like I
was,
said, I'm excited for you. I don't know what to say. I just think it's awesome. I know it's
yeah.
been a long time coming, and I know you've been really diligent in your training over the past decade plus at this point. And it's awesome to see.
Yeah. It's what I told the guys the other day. The only thing that's changed is now I have a darker, more visible target around my waist. That's
For sure.
that's all that's
Yeah.
changed for my teammates. They're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is going to be even more sweet than
There's
it was
nothing that
before. So
changes. I was talking with somebody about this because I think he was a new black belt, and there really isn't, even in your technique, there isn't anything that changes from August 29th to August 30th.
yeah, no,
There's nothing like some miraculous thing where all of a
just
sudden
pressure,
an hour
just
later
mental
you're
pressure
better.
is all.
Right. Right. So that's pretty cool. All right, brother. Well, let's get to these questions today. I think we've got some good ones left over from the questions that we solicited when you were wearing your cute little singlet that you had on last week. If you guys want to check that out, you can go back to, yeah, I mean, that's like that's like the PC way to say it, but I don't know. Maybe you guys have a different thought in mind.
Yeah. To check that out, or to where we're fielding these questions actually is from Ryan's Instagram. That's at Ryan Mickler, if you want to connect with him there. So
that's right. Yep.
All right. Robin Nashali. This is the best part about Instagram. It's just the names. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing them right because I'm not even sure what the name is. So it's perfect. All right. Do you address topics such as transgenderism, feminism, etc., with your children? And if so, how?
So the first part of the answer to the first question is yes, of course. Those are actually the conversations that are more important than anything else, because those are serious conversations that actually need to take place.
Yeah.
So what was it? Transgenderism, gender,
and feminism, etc.
Feminism, etc. Sex, drugs, pornography,
anything like difficult. Yeah.
Anything that you don't want to talk about are the things that you should be talking about. Totally. So 100% we're having these conversations. And how do I have it? I usually lead off with questions. This is the best way to have a conversation with people. Lead off with questions. And I figured this out because I'm a professional podcaster. So learning to ask better questions is an important skill set that I've needed to develop. But I also know this is important as a natural introvert. And I don't like putting that label on it necessarily, because if I say, well, I'm an introvert, then it's like you accepting a label being that. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. But I am, because, and I know that, here's how I know I'm an introvert, because I get drained when I'm in social environments, mentally drained. And I don't ever feel the need to be around a bunch of people. Like, I can be quiet. I can sit there in a room by myself. I can go for a swim in the lake. I can work on my canoe. I can do anything by myself, and it doesn't bother me at all. I'm not like, oh, I wish there was people around. I wish I had somebody to talk to. I'm not like that at all. Yeah. But when I'm out in public and I'm talking with people and having conversations, I'm engaged and I like having those conversations, but I leave those conversations exhausted. It's kind of a weird thing for people who don't understand that. Like, we had bonfires, at immersion camp, and guys are like, yeah, I'm going to stay out there till 1. And I'm like, oh, that sounds exhausting. Not just because it's 1 a.m., but because you have to talk. So, totally. All right, to wrap this back into this, Ask good questions. Yeah. It's the best way to have conversations with people, because you get to know where they're coming from, and you get to know what they understand, and you get a glimpse into their perception and their reality and their experience of things. And children are no different. If you want to talk with your children about transgenderism, I think the most appropriate avenue would be to say, tell me what you know. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you've heard. And asking solid questions will then allow you to formulate the proper dialogue with your children. Because what I'm going to talk with about transgenderism, for example, with my 8-year-old is going to be different than what I'm going to talk about with my 13-year-old. But unless I know where they're coming from and their mentality and what they've heard or what they learned or what they see or what they feel, it's going to be hard for me to formulate an appropriate response to those questions and those curiosities. But yeah, absolutely, I talk about it. Now, if you're asking how, I tell my children what I think is wrong and what I think is right. What is virtuous living? What is not virtuous living? What is going to serve you well and what is not going to serve you well? So I don't pull punches just because society told me that we have to be accepting of all these sorts of weird, different, twisted things. Like, I'm going to talk with my children about that, but I'm going to do it with a level of empathy and try to understand, where is it that they're coming from? What do they understand about it? And then what lessons do they need to learn that is my job as a father to be able to communicate effectively. So that's my broad general answer. I don't know if they're asking me about the specifics of what I think about transgenderism or feminism. I have my thoughts about that, and I've been very vocal about those things throughout the years. So yeah, that's my general answer.
Ryan, I'd assume that you would also recommend that this isn't oh, it's been 6 months, let's sit down and have this formalized meeting and cause our kids to like be all paranoid and make it a big deal. That like take advantage of these conversations, these opportunities on a regular basis while they're playing, when things come up, like, which obviously requires us to be around our kids quite a bit as well. But you know what I mean? Don't
Completely.
think that like, oh, it's been a year, let me like have this family meeting and then we're not going to talk about it anymore for another 12 months, right? Like these are things, opportunities will present themselves at the weirdest time. And it might be during a commercial on TV. It might be coming home from school and saying, hey, I don't understand this. And that in the moment training and guidance and direction, I would recommend is probably critical.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, my oldest son had an activity the last couple of days and he saw this girl that he was attracted to, you know, she was cute or whatever. And so I asked him about it, not because I don't tease my kids about things that I think are healthy for them. Like I don't tease my boys about girls and I don't tease my girl about boys because
you don't want to have a negative connotation.
Why would I do that? Why would I mock them about that? And we don't let each other mock each other about that. So my oldest was telling me she was cute and stuff. And I had like, oh, you have a girlfriend now? No, none of that. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, did you talk to her? What, like, how did it go? Like the little moments in time, just little, like seemingly insignificant moments that might bring up a conversation that is hard and awkward and at times uncomfortable, but very healthy for your child and for you to be able to have the conversations in the moment. Sometimes I think about it when it comes to like training an animal. And I think I've used this analogy before. If let's say you have a new puppy and the puppy pees on the carpet, do you wait to scold the puppy or discipline the puppy? Do you wait 48 hours? And then 48 hours later, you go and like kick it in the ribs or something because you're mad that it was peed on the carpet? No, of course not. Because it's not going to be able to link up what it did with the level of discipline or how you responded and reacted. And I'm not telling you to go kick dogs in the ribs, by the way. Okay. Let's be clear on that.
I was totally going to cover you on that
one. So you wouldn't do that, or maybe you would, but it's inappropriate. So you need to discipline in the moment. So if I had a puppy, what I would do is I would be harsh and stern with it, and I would pick it up and I would go put it outside, or, you know, put it in the corner where you have it pee on the pee pad or whatever, however you're training your dog, right? That's what I would do in the moment. So it understands, it starts formulating those connections. Well, children are the same way. If they have experiences or things or moments that are good learning opportunities and you wait a week to have the conversation, I think the kids are going to be like, what in the world I don't get it. What are you talking about? They don't even remember what they had for breakfast, let alone some seemingly insignificant conversation or experience they had last week. So make sure that you have enough margin in your life to be able to have the conversations in the moment. Because if you're always so busy with other things, work and your own aspirations, then there's no margin to be able to say, hey, so you got a girl's number. Like, that's cool. Like, so you going to call her? Like, what are you going to do? You know, so because you don't have the margin to do it, but you have to have the margin to be able to have these meaningful conversations with your kids.
Copy. All right. David's BJJ. I know I perform my best when I have a rigid schedule to adhere to because it forces me to get my work done on a time around fixed events. I struggled to implement discipline on my own regarding blocks of time to sit down and focus on getting work done. Being self-employed is definitely a double-edged sword. How have you found success with creating your own schedule and sticking to it when you are the only person holding yourself to it?
I do the same thing. Like, just because I'm holding myself accountable doesn't mean I need to have a different schedule than if somebody else was going to hold me accountable. Right? Like, you're a grown man. Kip, I don't need you to tell me when to show up and how to show up and what time I need to get out of bed. Like, if I do, then I'm not actually being a man.
Yeah.
I'm being a boy. I'm consuming resources, right? We've talked about that in the past, consume versus produce. If I need you to reach out to me and say, hey, Ryan, it's time for you to get out of bed. And Ryan, you have to do this thing and that thing. Then I'm just consuming your resources for things that
Totally.
I should be able to handle on my own. So yeah, I don't need somebody else to tell me what to do. And if you feel like you need somebody else to tell you what to do, then there's some deficiencies here. One is just a lack of self-worth. So I should say self-respect.
Yeah.
Do you have any self-respect? And if you do, then you would treat yourself in a respectful way. And a respectful way means you care about it enough that you're going to plan and you're going to organize and you're going to create systems and have processes in place that will allow you to accomplish what it is you're after. Or I don't know, do you like being babysat? Like, how does that feel? That wouldn't feel good to me, that I would need somebody else hanging over my shoulder telling me what to do at any given moment. So the answer is the mental shift of, am I a man or am I a boy? And if you're a man, then what men do is they create the systems and the processes and procedures that are required to achieve a desired result.
Yeah.
So what is your desired result? Well, I want to excel at work. Great. What needs to be done? What time do you need to wake up? How much time do you need to invest? Or I want to become more physically fit. Great. Worthy goal. How much time in the gym? What do you need to do? How do you need to train? I'm not saying you can't get help. You should hire a trainer. Maybe that's part of your program, but that person shouldn't hold you accountable to things you should be self-accountable to. And that comes with the mindset of being a man, not a perpetual little boy that so many in society are.
Yeah, totally. And one thing that we talk about in the Iron Council, or at least I bring up with new battle team leaders, is we have a tendency sometimes to look at accountability as, well, if we have a culture of accountability, that means Ryan harasses me when I don't do something. And what it should be, a good culture of accountability, is me being committed to a desired outcome. So I'm self-directed, and you're there to support me in being self-directed and possibly remove blockers when necessary. But you can't be like, accountability is not you saying, hey, Kip, do burpees because you didn't do X. That's not being self-directed. And what happens is Ryan goes on vacation. Then what happens?
Right.
I have no discipline because Ryan's not there to give me the social pressure to ensure to doing something. And so I would focus, David's like, why aren't you self-directed? Why aren't you committed to the desired outcome? And when maybe that why, or your understanding of the impact of you doing or not doing certain things is not strong enough. So you need to get clear on what that impact is, right? And figure out, how do you get get in a position where you're self-directed on accomplishing your goals.
Well, yes, you're 100% right on all of that. And I would also say, and add to this, is that forget about the vacation thing. Like, what makes you think I have the time or desire to hold you accountable to getting out of bed on time or to do your push-ups or your exercise? I don't care about that. Like, I've got my own stuff. I've got a billion other things I need to be doing. And so if I need to send you a message to get out of bed at 6 a.m., set your damn alarm. You don't need me to do that for you. Right. Totally. So like, have some self-respect. And again, that's not to say that you can't get help where it's needed. Well, here's a great example, very small example. But Kip, you and I used to record on Tuesday, right? But for this podcast, but Tuesdays didn't work for our editor because he needed more time to make sure he edited and put it up properly and everything else. And so I said, well, how about, Monday at 9? You're like, well, I can't do that because of X, Y, and Z. Okay, well, there's some accountability. And I said, well, okay, what time works for you? Or what time works for me? And so we came up with a time that worked for both of us. And then we hold each other accountable. I expect you to be here because that's what you agreed to. You expect me to be here because that's what I agreed to. And then if we fall short, and we have, I've been late or you've been late, then we tell each other like, hey, let's make sure we start on time. And that's a level of accountability that comes from somebody else. But also, I respect myself enough. And guess who else I respect enough? I respect you enough to show up on time as needed so that we can do what we agreed upon. And that's how a man behaves. And that's how he shows up. So be one.
There you go. All right. Double Hall Paul. Fellas, thanks for the great podcast and all your efforts to restore masculinity. Simple question. How do you maintain discipline in consistency when working on self-improvement? I tend to hit a wall or succumb to fatigue after sustained efforts to improve myself. What systems, tactics, and strategies have you used to reduce this tendency? Thanks again for your efforts.
So I think hitting a wall comes from one of two things.
Yeah.
One is you just lack focus because you've never seen anything through to the end. And so you're always distracted by the bright and shiny object. That might be what's happening.
Yeah. Like you're motivated and you're killing it because it's exciting still. And then it's not exciting. And then we call that a wall because it's no longer enjoyable or mentally difficult to maybe get through.
The luster wears off, or you see a law of diminishing returns. Like if you take jujitsu, for example, when you first start, you're going to see vast improvements almost immediately. Right. Yeah. You're going to learn a couple little techniques and strategies, and you're going to see big leaps and bounds. But when you go, and you can talk to this a little bit more than I can, when you go from brown to black belt, the return or the increase is limited, right? It's smaller, it's incremental.
Smaller.
It's that law of diminishing return. Now, if you scale back and look at it over 15 years, then of course it looks massive. But when you go from being a brown belt, I assume, to being a black belt, there's little things that you're picking up that aren't going to drastically change your game overnight.
Totally.
Okay. So we have the law of diminishing return. And so what most of us do is we're so focused on how we feel about things and how exciting they are and how entertained we are. And, you know, if there's any sort of inconvenience, like we don't want to do it because we've conditioned ourselves to always be entertained and feel good. And so what do we gravitate towards? The things that feel good and the things that are entertaining. And if you have to sit through a conference or you don't see the progress as quickly as you'd like, and it's a little boring or a little mundane or monotonous, you're like, well, this isn't fun. Okay, but that isn't the metric of success. Like, why did you start believing this idea that you're only on the right path if it's fun and enjoyable? Like, that's not true at all. Anything that I ever done worth anything is not always fun and enjoyable. In many cases, it's just not enjoyable at all, but you do, and you trudge through it because it's important to you. So that might be the first reason, is bright and shiny object, lack of focus. The other reason is you might be burning yourself out. So when we get all hot and upset and emotional and excited about things, we make rash decisions and we go overboard. It reminds me of like Tim the Toolman Taylor, right? He always like, and he always buys like the biggest and best and baddest. And then it ends up going really poorly for him. Right. Yeah, totally. So here's an interesting thing that my mom said to me, and I hesitate to say this, but it's very funny that she would say this. When I got married, I'm really hesitant to share this. When I got married, she's being a great mom. I kind of feel bad that she had to be the one to say it, but she did, and she's doing her job. When I got married, I think it must have been the day or two before, she said something like, she's like, hey, can I share something with you? And I said, yeah. And she's like, I can't remember the verbiage she used, but she said something to the effect of, don't be a one pump chump. And I was like, what, Mom? I can't. And she's like,
by the way, I've never even heard that term until like a month ago. You got this.
Oh, really?
Like you got this like 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah. And I was
Mom was up with the times.
I was like, Mom, I don't want to hear this. And she's like, I know. And I know you don't want to hear it. I don't want to tell you it, but like, it's important for her too. And she's like trying to give me this advice, you know, and it's so awkward and uncomfortable. But she was doing a good job. Awesome. as a mother. I wish I maybe had a man in my life to kind of give me some of that advice, but I didn't. So she had to do what she had to do. So I commend her for that. And that must have been very awkward for her to say that. But the reason I bring it up is because, like, don't be that guy, like the one pump chump. You like blow your wad on like one thing because you're super excited about it. It's like, just slow down for a second, like make it last. All right. So if you're we're going to go back to jujitsu. If you're like, I want to do jujitsu, like, you don't have to go 7 days a week, all day, every day, 2 days, forever. Like, why don't you just go to a class or two a week?
Yeah.
and just see, it's okay. Like, just see how it goes. And then maybe a year down the road, you're like, I really like this. I'd like to pump up my training a little bit. I'm going to do three nights a week. Or I'm going to do 2 nights and 1 morning.
Yeah.
Or same thing with the gym or with running. You're like, I'm going to run a marathon. Well, you're okay, but like, don't go run a marathon this morning. Like, run 2 miles this morning. And then next week, maybe try to get a 5 miler in. And the following week, try to get 7 miles in, and make it last, because the real measure and metric of success, to me anyways, is sustainability.
Yeah.
Because anybody could be good at anything for 24 hours.
Yeah.
But can you make it last? I go back to Ricardo Laborio. He said he started training when he was 16. He's 56. He's been training for 40 years. There's very few people in the world who can be committed and disciplined at something for 40 years. That's why he's one of the best.
Yeah.
Not because he was naturally talented or gifted or had this ability or this or that, but because he's been doing it for 40 years consistently.
Consistency. Yeah.
Yes. So the metric and measure of your success should be how long you last, not, to be a little crude, how big it is when you go. You know what I'm saying?
Totally. And I think it's interesting to hear what you're saying, and then think how that relates to people in our lives, and think what type of stability that creates for a spouse and for your children. And you take those two scenarios and they're drastically different, right? We all know the guy that's like, I'm running a marathon, I'm changing my life, next shiny object. And his wife's like, no trust in him.
Yep.
Just another exciting thing that he's pumped up on that will fade out, and he'll move on to the next thing. Unreliable is how that is perceived.
Well, and Kip, there's a question we get all the time, which is, my wife doesn't believe in me, or she doesn't support me. Yeah, man, because you have a track record of unreliability. Yeah. So of course she doubts. Of course she questions. Of course she doesn't believe you, because everything that you've done proves to her that you aren't trustworthy. So if you want to win her trust, you want to, or I should say earn, I think that's a better word. You want to earn her trust, then you have to be trustworthy over long and sustained periods of time.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because some guys listening right now might be thinking, well, yeah, me working out for 4 weeks and then stop going to the gym, that doesn't have to do anything with my wife, Ryan. So I could quit that and it's not a big deal. You know what I mean? Because I didn't commit to her, I committed myself. Right. Trust me, guys.
But she's going to see that.
She's going to see that and go, oh yeah, he can't stick to something.
He's flaky. Yep.
He's flaky, whether she was involved or not.
And it's not only your wife, it's your kids, it's your colleagues, your coworkers, people you're asking to follow you. Like, they're going to see it. They're going to see all of that. And all of those little micro decisions that you're making or not making are going to stack up and add up. And that's what people are going to believe about you. And it's true. They're right.
Yeah. Ryan, I've heard you give this advice before, and I just want to confirm that you would add it to this guy's question, is sometimes you are burning yourself out, and you've talked about being creative or mixing things up or other things. Do you want to kind of go into that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Is if you are feeling burned out and tired and just exhausted, then it might be time just to mix things up. And look, I know there's a real phenomenon, and I can't remember what it's called. I was reading a book or saw an article or something that we have this, I don't know what it's called. I'm going to use this term, like taste bud fatigue, where, for example, don't ever, guys, I'm telling you right now, and don't even do it as a joke. Don't ever offer me a bologna sandwich, because I will not eat a bologna sandwich. Because guess what my mom made me when I was little and I went to lunch and she packed me lunch? It was a bologna and cheese sandwich every day, all day for my entire schooling.
I hate bologna as well.
I don't want a bologna sandwich. Okay. Don't give that to me. Taste bud fatigue, right? It's like you get, or you'll be eating, a bowl of beans and rice, for example, and you're like, I don't want any beans and rice. And somebody says, well, we have, steak. And you're like, oh yeah, I have plenty of room for steak. So is it that you were full, or was it just taste bud fatigue? Yeah. And that's a real phenomenon, but it translates over into our lives as well, because we have activity fatigue, and we're not robots, right? Maybe Jocko is a little bit, but outside of Jocko, we're not robots. You know, there are people who are just so, and I'm not saying that with any ill
So
intent
rigid.
at all. I'm just saying,
yeah.
Right. And there's people who it works for. I'm not one of those guys. Like, I'm not going to wake up at 4:30 every morning and do the exact same thing all day, every day, forever. Like, I'm not like that. I'm not hardwired like that. So I need to mix it up. And that's part of the reason that CrossFit, when I was doing CrossFit more, was really, really good for me, is because of that variety, right? There was enough variety and spice to it that it wasn't always the same thing. And that goes to what you're saying, Kip. And the point you're making is that you might just need to mix it up. So if you're really focused on the fitness journey right now and you've been doing strength training and that's your thing, then, you know, maybe weave in a day of cardio and, you know, just go for a run or get a paddle board and go paddle around the lake or go surfing or go to jiu-jitsu or whatever. Like, mix it up. You can still work towards your goal of being fit and healthy, but mix it up so that you have some variety in your life that keeps you on the path that you want to be on.
Yeah. Cool.
Same thing with dating your wife. Like, if your idea of date night is
date other people, mix it up. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
We're joking.
We better throw that disclaimer on the front and back, because occasionally I'll have women who this woman reached out to me the other day and she said, like, it was a comment on a Facebook post or Instagram post. And she said, you know, like, you really need to talk to men about what the importance of salvaging their marriages. I'm like, that's all I talk about.
It seems like
that's the only thing I talk about.
Have we ever said anything other than that ever?
That's exactly what I said to her. And I guess she's got her husband who is either she's misinterpreting it or he has misinterpreted our message. And he's saying that, you know, he should leave or something. I didn't catch the whole thing, but I'm like, that's all. I don't even know how I got on that tangent, but don't be dating other people. But if your idea of date night is to go to Texas Roadhouse and then go to a movie and then you can have the same sex that you always have with your wife, like, at some point, like, that's going to become not really all that fun. So maybe there's something else you can do with her. Maybe you get a hotel for the evening and you go on a little staycation and you have a great night that way. You know, mix. All I'm saying is stay on the path, but mix it up so that it is still interesting and still engaging and fun.
Yeah. Well said.
We're just going to leave it there. I feel like there's something else you want to say to that.
No. It was good.
Okay, good.
All right. Mike, Joe Tatus. I'm 41 years old, newly divorced within the last 6 months, single dad with 3 kids, ages 8, 6, and 4, 2 boys and a girl. Mm-hmm. What advice do you have for dating women and or looking for the right partner? I appreciate all you guys do. Thanks in advance.
Does he say how recently divorced? I didn't catch it if he did.
6 months.
That's pretty quick to me. That seems, to me personally, look, I've never been divorced. Maybe you can speak on this a little bit, Kip, because I know you've gone through some of this, but bro, that seems pretty quick, like 6 months. You're like, oh, how do I date women? And for me, from the outside looking in, take this with a grain of salt, because I've never been in this situation. I would be hyper focused on my children first and my own self-development second, and then just let some of this stuff play out naturally. That's kind of where, when I read that question or hear that question, that's where my mind goes. But what do you think? I would be curious on your thoughts.
I entirely agree. I think, and my focus was 100%, I don't want to do this again. And I gotta evaluate why I got divorced, and the role I played in that divorce, and make sure I show up in it better the next time. And it wasn't about like, oh, so let's start dating so I show up better. It was like, no, let's resolve. Because let's be honest, we all know this. You know, when you get married, you bring your baggage. And so I really felt like I got to address whatever that baggage is, get clear in my mind, get on a path, have some self-confidence, not reliant on, affirmations from a female for me to feel good about my value.
Good call.
And I got to feel amazing about myself, regardless of whether a girl's engaged or interested in me. So that was like 100%. And the other thing I'd say to this guy is,
hold on. I got to say before you, cause I want you to go into that bit of advice I didn't think about, but I think, guys, if you're divorced or you're separating, I think what you just said is something you really, really need to wrap your head around, which is not seeking validation about your worth from a woman. You said that, and you said it kind of quickly.
Yeah.
And I just want to reiterate and just drive that home. You've been with a woman because you've been married. And so you're probably deriving some sense of worth from being a husband. So if you're no longer a husband, your worth may feel like it's diminished, and you think that being with a woman is going to validate your worth, and it just is not going to validate your worth. So I just wanted to harp on that. Yeah. Continue what you were sharing, Kip.
Yeah. And I would say the other thing is, you know, in fact, at immersion, I was talking with a fellow guy that we were training with, you know, during the week about this concept of divorce and families and children and possibly becoming a single father. And the reality of it is you have an uphill battle. Officially, as of 6 months, your impact on your children is going to be 100 times more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So you better be 100 times better than you were before.
Good call.
So how are you going to be the world's most amazing dad? So then that way you can have a positive impact on your kids' life, despite the fact that they are now in a split home.
Right.
And figure that out too. So those are the things that I would focus on. And finding the quote unquote right partner, that's just going to show up. I think you take care of those other things, that will eventually work out, you know. And one thing, or last thing I'll share before I hand it back over to you is I dated a number of girls, obviously, during my divorce. And it was interesting how I kept getting cold feet. You know, I would be dating a girl and she wanted to get more serious or whatever. And I was immediately like, I'm not ready for this. I think something's wrong. You know what I mean? Like maybe I'm still damaged, you know what I mean? Or whatever. And I really felt it was me. Ironically, then I met my wife and none of that was an issue.
Interesting.
And I was like, oh, it wasn't me. It was you. I just wasn't dating the right woman. And once I met her, I was like, oh yeah, I'm ready. But it was interesting that I kept, like, I second guessed myself constantly of like, I'm not ready for this. When in reality, I don't think I found the right person yet, you know? So
that's interesting.
Just keep dating. Yeah. It was kind of not something I foresaw. It was interesting once I met her.
So no, I think those are all really good. I wrote 2 things down here as you were talking that I think would, again, I haven't been in this situation, but maybe because I haven't, I can give you maybe a more of a clear thought on this as well.
Yeah, for sure.
There's another thought here that I wrote, and that is to get rid of all expectations. So if you are going to date another woman and you want to date, like, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. Just make sure you're ready to. But if you are going to date, is lower the expectations. Like, maybe you just enjoy the company of being around another attractive woman, and that's enough. That's okay. Right.
Yeah,
like,
she doesn't have to be your wife. Yeah.
And she doesn't even have to be your girlfriend. Like, she doesn't have to be this, like, there isn't some label that you need to put on your relationship. You just want to enjoy the company of a woman, and you're going to see where it goes. You're going to take it easy and take it in stride. And that's it. And I think that's good. I think that's healthy. The other thing I would say is, and guys are going to say, well, I'm being a prude, is don't go out and have a bunch of sex with women. Like, don't do that, because I would actually liken that in most situations to going to the bottle or getting involved in drugs. It's just a form of sedation, and you think that you're going to feel better because you're going to get off with an attractive woman. And I don't think, at least in the experience I've seen with other men, that is going to be the case. I don't think that's going to happen. I think you're going to feel shittier. I think it comes with unintended and unwanted consequences, like potentially STDs, unwanted pregnancy, which is a big one. I can't tell you how many guys in the Facebook group are like, I've been dating this girl for 3 years and now we have a kid together and we hate each other. Well, bro, you had a kid together. What the hell?
What do you expect? Yeah, that's what happens when you put your penis in someone.
It's sad that you need to say that, right? Okay, so and then there's the emotional attachment. Like, I think we have a responsibility to honor the women that we're with too, you know, and if you're going to have sex with another woman, she might be thinking it's more than what you, in fact, she probably is in most cases, because this is just the dichotomy between sexes. And all of a sudden you're, you know, maybe leading her on to thinking that this is more than it actually is. So just be very, very careful with what you do sexually when you're in this situation, because you're in a vulnerable spot right now. And you could do one of two things. Generally, you could make it better by shoring up your vulnerabilities, which is what we were talking about earlier, working on yourself and fixing yourself, or you can compound your vulnerability by doing things you shouldn't be doing and making it worse than it needs to be. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I like it. All right, Garrett Silvers, 18. How does one battle moral beliefs versus work mandates? Military requiring the vaccine here soon, possibly on the 15th of September. You talk about leaving a business if you have moral conflicts, but what if the business is the military? Thank you for all you guys do.
But what? Like, that's not different.
Yeah.
You have an employer. The US government is your employer. That's the business. And the business of military is a business. Let's not make any qualms.
But you give up your rights as a, you know what I mean? So that does change things for you. I mean, doesn't it? Do you have
compared
choice?
to a business? Yeah, you leave.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't change anything. Now, granted, if you're in a contract, you know, you're still okay. Well, you know, that's the contract you signed and you made, you know, but there's, you'd leave. Like, I already addressed this issue, and it doesn't change because it's the military. And it also, it doesn't change because you really feel good about your work. Like, that's one of the hard choices of life. You might really enjoy your work. You might really enjoy your company. You might really like doing that. There might be something that's deeply gratifying and satisfying. Okay, well, you need to make your decision then. I'm not telling you this is an easy decision. You know, if you have your morality in check, that everything's going to be easy. No, actually, it's going to be harder. It's harder to live by your moral code than it is just to waffle to and fro based on what an employer demands of you, government or otherwise. So I did a podcast 2 weeks ago. I think it was called Inoculating Yourself Against Employer Mandates. It was a Friday Field Notes 2 or 3 weeks ago. Go back and listen to that in the context of your unique situation. And everything I talked about applies, whether you're a military member or a civilian contractor or a civilian working with a civilian and private company. It's all the same. So listen to yourself for a second. Like really listen to what you just said. What you're saying is it okay to sacrifice my morals to stay employed by an organization? That's exactly what you said. You said it a little differently, but that's exactly what you said. Is it okay to sacrifice my moral standard to stay employed by an organization? I think you know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
That doesn't make it easier because you know the answer. The answer is the same regardless.
Yeah. And just imagine if people didn't compromise their morals and stayed in jobs.
Yeah, like, good point.
I mean, that's our problem. That's our problem in society, in my opinion, right now, is we compromise morals for success, for our jobs, for, you know, social acceptance and all these other things. This is at the root of social issues.
You're 100% right. And regardless of whether you're thinking about leaving your employer or not, or there's things they're doing that go against your morals or not, go back and listen to that podcast and apply what I said, because you'll always be in a better position if you heed that advice. Whether or not you need to leave your employer or not, you're going to be in a better position when you hold all of the cards. And what a lot of people are doing is they're giving other organizations, the government, people, their wives, their kids, colleges, everything else, they're giving them all the cards and trusting that they're going to make the best decisions. Some of them they will, and that's good. You need to hold the cards. You need to call the shots. And if you're in a situation where you can be compromised, you're not holding the cards. But if you hold the cards, what that does, my stepfather used to say this. He said, knowledge isn't power, options is power. If you hold all of the cards, you have options. You may choose to stay. You may choose to go. You may choose to start a new business. You can choose whatever you want because you hold all the cards. That is the goal. Sovereignty. You got a book over your left shoulder, Kip. Sovereignty is the goal. And then you have options. You could stay with your current employer. And to that, I say, great. A lot of people, I think, misinterpret some of these conversations we're having is like men need to be entrepreneurs. No, that's not what I'm telling you. You need to be sovereign. You need to be in control of your career and your fate and your finances and your health. That might mean for a time it's working with another employer. And that's great. I don't have any problem with that. I don't think less of, well, you work for somebody. I don't think less of you because that's the case, but you're sovereign. You've made that choice, not out of necessity, but because that's a choice that you wanted to make.
Yeah. And I look at it as an agreement, just like I would look as an agreement if I was working as a consultant for them. It's no different. It's a different form of an agreement, different form of taxes or whatever, but it's no different, you know?
Yep. So you don't have sovereignty right now because you're asking this question. If you had sovereignty, you wouldn't have to ask the question. You would have already moved along. So what can you do to move yourself in the right direction? Let's take a couple more.
Okay. S. Buck Sumter, what are some good forms of discipline for children? I have a very strong-willed, good-behaved, and wild children, but I am having issues with disciplining them. Any advice or perspective on this topic would be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, so I've got one of those.
Book reference here.
What's that?
I said I'm pulling up a book reference.
Okay. I was just saying I've got one of those kids who, is a good kid and wild and rambunctious and rowdy and everything else. That's my youngest. And, discipline is important, right? There's got to be structure. There's got to be wake up times. There's got to be bedtimes. There's got to be consequences. There's got to be chores and you got to help out around the house. All these things we already know. I would imagine you already know these things and you're probably applying
consistency
them.
of consequences and communications and schedules. Yeah.
But there's one thing that I think we often overlook, especially with these rambunctious kids of ours, is that it's actually not bad that they're energetic. And it's not bad that they're creative or they're unique or that they're wild or that they're full of, piss and vinegar. Like that's not bad. I used to think, oh, I don't want a kid like that because that's bad. Like I want a well-behaved kid. But now that I have my youngest son, like he brings a joy and excitement to my life that just wouldn't be in my life in any other way. It just wouldn't be there, And so it's not bad. So what I would suggest that maybe you haven't heard before or considered is that maybe you're not looking at it right. And instead you ought to be working on ways to harness his energy. Like harness it, like wield it as a tool, like a little ball of energy, like maybe explore it. Maybe don't try to hamper it as much. Maybe don't try. Now, look, he needs to be respectful at church, right? Like he needs to sit down and be quiet for sure. And there's appropriate times for that. But then there's also an appropriate time to just go on the trampoline and just jump around with him, or in the morning, wake up and roll around on some jujitsu mats that you got, or to, if he's like my kid, if I left it to him, he would just take a Sharpie marker and just paint all over the walls. So that's not acceptable, but painting is acceptable.
Canvas. Yeah.
So let's find a way where, hey, these are your Sharpie markers. These are yours. They're not mine. They're not mom's. They're not brothers, sisters. They're yours. And here is where you're going to do it. And so draw and paint and sketch till your heart's content in this environment, right? But so often it's like, I'm going to spank him because he drew on the wall. Well, instead, just get him a canvas.
Yeah.
Right. Or, he runs outside and he always wants to be outside barefoot. Okay, well, yeah, good, cool. Like get some grass and some fields and some forest and go out hiking. And when you get to the base of the hiking trail, say, hey, you know what? Let's take our shoes off today and let's just go run around. Like harness it, embrace it in the appropriate environment. And I think you're going to have less of a time dealing with issues. This is actually one of the problems I have with the medical and especially therapy community. It's like, well, let's sedate him.
Yeah.
He's got ADHD. Does he though? Or is he just really excited about life?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the most over uh, prescribed or diagnosed things is ADHD. It's like, no, let's go run it out of them. Let's go on a hike. Let's go on a swim. Let's paint something. Let's go blow some, get some fireworks, go blow something up, teach them safety in controlled environment, but like harness that. And I'm learning that over the past 5 years because I have one just like I think what you're talking about here. And I used to really be like, oh, so hard. And now I'm like, it's so awesome because we get to do cool stuff. And it's my job as the father to figure out when it's appropriate and then to harness it and when it's not appropriate. So I give them the vents, the outlets. We've talked about it before with my wife doing her canning, right? So she does this canning and the way that you seal it is that you pressurize it. But there's this little vent on the top and the vent lets out the steam because if there wasn't a vent, it would literally turn into a bomb. It would explode because of the heat and the pressure. Yeah. So the vent is what allows it to vent off. What are your vents and what are his vents? And if you don't have any, he's going to blow up and then it's going to be bad.
Yeah. I like it. On the topic of just disciplining, I think, and this is you actually, I've heard you say this numerous times and I've latched onto it because I thought it was profound when you said it the first time, was always remember what's the lesson. And that has been key for me. It's like, what is it that I want my child to learn in this example? And sometimes I get wrapped up on the task, right? It's like, no, I want the room clean. No. Actually, that's not really the lesson. I want my kids to respect their things, you know what I mean? And to be disciplined enough to put their things away and have an orderly bedroom. That's what I want them to learn. And sometimes I destroy that opportunity to learn because I want a room clean. So, so that's one thing that I would recommend or echo what you've already said in the past. And then the other area that I struggle with that I know I need to improve on is being stoic in the moment of disciplining, to remove my meaning or I guess the emotional reaction that might be natural in my disciplining of my children, because to reference, Cale Carnegie, it's like people want to feel important. Your kids are no different. They want to feel important. They want to know that they are loved and that they're valuable to you. So be careful when we discipline, not to take that away from them and make it about implementing a consequence without them questioning their love and affection from you. And I think at least I can do that substantially better when I remove my emotion and I'm just the disciplinary of the consequences. I'm not, throwing my emotional judgment on them about, them becoming short, coming up short or not meeting my expectations.
Yeah. I wrote this down as you were saying that you're objectively disciplining your children, not subjectively disciplining them. So objectivity, meaning that there's a standard, which also means a couple of things. You need to have a standard.
Yeah.
And you need to communicate it so that they understand it. And then you need to honor it. Because if you have a standard and you've communicated, okay, so here's what happens if you don't.
You're just enforcing, right? They're aware of the rule.
Right. That's right. But if you have a standard and you communicate it and then you don't uphold it, then you're either weak or you're a liar. And your children won't use that verbiage, but that's how you come across to them. You're weak, so now they're going to manipulate you, or you're a liar and they don't believe you. So if you have a standard, communicate the standard, uphold the standard objectively,
consistently.
Yeah. And consistently. Yep. Then you're strong, you're a good, assertive leader, and you're a man of your word. They may not appreciate it totally now, but they will appreciate that steadfastness, that rock in their family dynamic, in their own personal growth.
Yeah. Which generates stability psychologically, whether they agree with it or not. That creates stability and safety. Yeah.
Right.
One book that crossed my mind, and it's a book that we covered this past month, or this current month, I should say, because it's not over yet, in the Iron Council. And I was actually really surprised how much I was able to relate this book to parenting, which was Crucial Accountability. That book was spot on for parenting. So maybe a recommendation there for
Nice.
for our individual,
For our listeners.
S-Buck.
I like it. Cool.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Nate Nunali.
Last one today, Kip.
Okay. Sounds good. Nate Nunali, 1776. I'm dating a girl. We have a lot in common as in what we want in our future, to the point where I can actually see my future with her in it. However, her parents are very controlling and absolutely hate me just because we're together. Advice on how to deal with that.
This is a package deal, bro.
Or yeah, her parents aren't going to disappear just because you guys got married.
They're only actually, they're going to, it's the opposite of that. They're going to be more present.
Yeah.
Maybe. So 2 things. You really, really need to identify whether or not this woman that you're dating can uphold boundaries. Well, first you need to ask if she has the same boundaries as you.
Regarding her parents. Yeah.
Yes, because if she doesn't, and they're going to be involved in all the little intricacies of your relationship, and every time you guys have a disagreement or a fight or whatever, or something, some sort of contention, she goes and runs to mommy and daddy, and that's her.
And they undermine the relationship because they hate you.
This is going to be bad. This is going to be really, really bad. So you need to have some serious conversations with her about how this will work if you guys decide to pursue a deeper relationship. And if she's on board with that and you feel like she's not just telling you what you want to hear, but that there actually is, through evidence of her performance, that she's on board with this and that she stands up for you and that there's some accountability here and there's some expectations and standards, then you need to talk with her about how you're going to ensure they stay in place together, how you and her are going to be on the same team, how you're going to work to ensure that's the case, how you're not going to undermine, what boundaries do you have in place that keep your potential in-laws at bay and not crossing over. So those are the 2 things. Does she have the same expectation and standard that you do? And is she willing to help you enforce those? And if either one or a no, you got to know this is a package deal. And at this point, you're on your own. It's like you're behind enemy lines at this point. I told you right now, those are the things. If they're not in place, you're on your own, and best of luck to you. And it's hard. It's super hard because this woman sounds like a great woman. She sounds like you really love her. You want to spend your life with her. Obviously, that's what you're saying. But those aren't the only things that matter. So yeah, I'm just telling you, like, you're young, you're in love, probably, you're a young pup in love. So it's hard to like talk with you about this stuff. I'm just telling you, if you can't get those things in check, it's only going to be bad. It's boundaries.
If it's difficult now, it only gets harder when you get married.
I wish I had a better answer, man. I really do. But again, you need to talk with her about what she expects and how she sees this going. Are we going to live by your parents forever? Are they part of our decision-making process? Are we going to move? Do we not turn to your parents? All this stuff. And when there's conflict, how do we resolve that conflict? And you better make sure, I'm reiterating here, that you guys are on the same page, or at least willing to work towards being on the same page.
Ryan, would you recommend that, hey, if you guys are establishing these boundaries, do it now while you're dating?
Of course. You need to see that she can do
how
it.
This goes. Yeah.
Yeah. You need to see if she can do it.
Yeah.
Look, personally, I've always been an assertive person. So here's what I would do. If my girlfriend is somebody that I wanted to spend my entire life with, and I've never had to deal with this problem because I have great in-laws, fortunately. But this is the woman I wanted to spend my entire life with. And I realized that her and I are on the same page with expectations. We're both willing to uphold boundaries and standards and these expectations. I would, after talking about this with my wife, I would talk with my father-in-law. I personally would. Kip, if you were my father-in-law, I would say to you, I'd say, hey, look, Kip, I'm going to ask your daughter to marry me, and I would like your blessing in that. Do I have your blessing? If you say yes, great. If you say no, say, well, I'm still going to ask, but I wanted to respect you, but I'm my own man and I'm going to ask your daughter to marry me. And I felt like it was worth coming to talk with you. But also I know that you and your wife don't like me for whatever reason. And that isn't going to diminish the way I take care of your daughter. And it isn't going to diminish my role and responsibility as her husband and father of our children. And I'm just letting you know right now, we're doing this thing, and this is what we're going to do. So like, totally. That's what I would do. That's a hard conversation to have, but man, that's what I would do. And you know what I think that would do if you did it respectfully. I'm not saying you need to be a dick about it, but you do it with authority, you do it with assertiveness, and you do it with a level of respect. God, I can't imagine that not garnering some level of respect from your potential father-in-law.
For sure.
Tough situation. Yeah, heed our warning, please, because I do not want to hear from you in 7 years. And you said, hey, I asked you a question 7 years ago, and
divorce.
Yeah. And now my wife hates me because her parents undermined us at every decision. And I don't see my kids anymore. And she just went and moved with her mom and her dad. And I'm miserable. Like, this is played out, man. We've seen it, Kip. You and I have seen it dozens, if not hundreds of times from guys asking questions on this podcast. What's this guy's name?
I moved on. Sorry.
Okay. Look, Nate. Whatever his name is, Nate.
Yeah, Nate.
I am a time traveler. I have seen your future. If you do what we tell you, you'll be okay. If you don't, your future is dismal. And I'm being very harsh on this one because we know, Kip, we know. And I'm coming back from the past to tell you to listen. Please listen.
Okay.
That's it.
We filled a question from Ryan's Instagram. To connect with him there, go to Ryan at Ryan Mickler. And of course, to join us online on the socials, you can join us on Facebook, facebook.com/group/order of man. And what else, man? Swag in the store.
Yep. We got some reviews. New merchandise coming soon. Leave the ratings, reviews. Just biggest thing, guys, spread the word. Yeah. Spread the word. Shoot somebody a text, shoot somebody a message. Take a screenshot, post it up on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. Let people know. Shoot Kip and I a message. Let me know. I know, Kip, you're reposting a lot of things that people tag you on. I try to repost those things too, because we care. Like, it's important to us. And if you're getting value from it, it's nice for us to know that you're getting value. And then there might be somebody who, well, look, I can't pull it up because I've gotten so many messages over the past couple of days, but I got a message from a guy the other day, and he said, hey, I just wanted to let you know that my wife put her ring back on. And that's partly because of the work that we're doing here, Kip. It's partly because of, and that's what he said. I listen to what you're doing, and I admire what you're doing, and I've tried to become a better man. My wife put her ring back on. Guys, there might be somebody in your life who's struggling with that or something else, and they just hear something that Kip, you said, or I said, or one of our guests said, and it changes them. And then it changes the trajectory of their life with their family and their business and their community. And they're better because of it. And it could just be a simple text that, hey man, I was listening to these guys and I don't agree with everything they have, but they said this one thing at 12 minutes and 37 seconds, and you ought to listen to it because I think it applies to your situation. Could be as simple as that. You could save somebody's life quite literally. Totally. That's all I got, man. Cool. All right, guys. Well, appreciate the questions. Appreciate the feedback. And as always, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.